Welcome to Familypreneur, the podcast for parent entrepreneurs
raising kidpreneurs.
It's time for your weekly dose of inspiration and actionable tips to build your business and find better balance, all while strengthening your family. And now we'd like to introduce your host.
She's my mom and thebomb.com,
Meg Brunson.
Hey there, and welcome to episode number 84 of the Familypreneur podcast. As promised, I am going to stay on the podcasting bandwagon this week. So I want to talk about one of the Facebook ads that I've run to grow this podcast and to grow a bunch of other podcasts. But I also want you to know that if you are not a podcaster, you do not have to worry because this strategy is going to be beneficial to anybody who has a business, anyone who is using a website or a landing page to drive traffic, to encourage opt-ins, to grow a mailing list. Okay, this is going to be relevant for everybody, so stay tuned. If you are just finding this podcast, I would love to welcome you. I know I made so many amazing connections at PodFest this weekend and at the Women's Business Workshop event in Wisconsin. I attended both last week, and I know I have a lot of new people that are flocking to the show to see what we are all about, so welcome. After you give this episode a listen, I would love for you to head over to iTunes and leave an honest review. Reviews help this podcast become discovered by other people looking for new podcasts to listen to. And if you are a returning guest, thank you for tuning in again. I really appreciate the opportunity to spend a little bit of time with you today and to talk about marketing. So, when I was at PodFest, I talked about 3 main strategies for promoting your podcast. Today, we're going to dive into one of those strategies. It's the landing page strategy. Now, typically, when it comes to promoting a podcast, when people think of driving traffic to a website, they want to send traffic to their show notes page. But there's a problem with the show notes page for most podcasters. And this is true for most business owners when you're driving traffic to your website. The problem is that there is too much going on. If you go to my show notes page, or the show notes page of any other podcaster, or anybody's blog, anybody's normal everyday website, there are so many links in the header, so many links in the footer. Sometimes there's even a sidebar either on the left or the right side of the screen where there are just links, lots of places for people to go and explore and learn more about the business. And normally this isn't an awful thing, right? People want to get to know you, and so you're giving them the opportunity to do so. The reason that this becomes problematic when we're using Facebook ads to drive traffic to a website is because when we're running Facebook ads, we have a plan, right? We know exactly what we want people to do when they get to the website. We don't want them to get lost in the weeds, checking out our About Me page and the blog and the podcast and the media page and all the other fun stuff we have on our websites. We don't want that. We have a path we want people to take. So if you're promoting your podcast, what do you want them to do? Do you want them to read your About Me section? No, you want them to listen to a podcast episode. You want them to hit the subscribe button so that they're notified of your future episodes. So we need to make that clear. We need to make it obvious, and we need to ensure that there's a clear path for people to take when they click over to the landing page. Now, how does this relate to a different business, any other business type? If you are running a Facebook ad and you want to drive traffic to your website because you want to get people on your list, increase your mailing list, which of course would be a part of a strategy to nurture those email leads into becoming customers and clients down the road. If you want to get them to opt in and join your list, then you don't want them to get lost in the weeds either. They don't need to be looking at your About Me page and your Contact Us page and all of these other, shiny things all over your website. Instead, you need a landing page, a page that is free of distractions. No links in the header. The only links in the footer should be the privacy policy. and the terms and conditions. So you have the legally required links in the footer, but nothing else. And there should be one clear path that you want them to take. One button that they can click that will either pop that opt-in window or direct them to the exact place that you want them to go. So when you're trying to promote your podcast, you want to send them to a landing page where the only thing they see is proof that they're in the right place, and then the buttons that will link them off to your top podcast players. Now, Facebook themselves has a podcast, and they do this really well. I will link to Facebook's podcast landing page in my show notes so you can check that out. I've also run this strategy for podcasters like Dave Jackson and Dustin Heiner, and I will link to their podcast landing pages too, so you can see some examples of how different podcasters have taken this strategy, have leveraged it in order to really drive people to a page that will then segment them directly into the podcasting players on which they are most likely to listen and subscribe to those podcast episodes. Does this make sense? And the same strategy can be used if you are trying to increase opt-ins or an email list. So just keep that in mind as well. With the opt-ins or the email list, you may have some additional background information. With either example, you may have some additional information that you want to put on that page just to encourage them to take the next step, encourage them to click the button that will drive them either to the podcast player or that'll pop that opt-in form so that you can get their email. What you do not want to do is give them too many options. So the lesson for the day is that when you are running Facebook ads and you are driving traffic to a website, you need to take a step back and evaluate what your ultimate goal in running this ad is. What is it that you want people to do after they land on the web page? And once you have that answer, you need to structure that landing page so that it's the only option that people have, so that there's a clear path to getting people from this website to that desired outcome. All right, we want to make this obvious. We want to make this easy, and that is the key to converting. So the first strategy for all of my new podcast friends who are listening is that if you want to drive traffic, drive people to find your podcast, to subscribe, to listen, you can set up a landing page to do so. Of course, you're going to want to make sure that landing page is pixeled. So if you have not already installed the Pixel, then I 100% encourage you to go back to episode number 69 and listen to that episode. That is where we talk about the base Pixel, how to install it, and all of that good stuff. I've got videos on YouTube that'll show you exactly how to get the Pixel installed on WordPress, as well as a couple other platforms. So you definitely want the Pixel installed, and then you want to drive traffic to that landing page where they can then quickly and easily find the links for your top podcast players, iTunes, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, wherever your audience is listening. Those are the buttons that should be on that landing page. Now, at PodFest, I talked about 2 other strategies. I'm not going to leave you totally hanging. We'll talk about those in the coming weeks. But you are going to have to hit subscribe on this podcast so that you don't miss those episodes. This is only a tiny sliver of what we talked about at PodFest, and I would love to tell you all of the secrets. So, hit subscribe. Join me again next Monday where I'll dive deeper into the second strategy for podcasters. And again, it will also be totally relevant if you have a non-podcast business. This information is all applicable across the board. I just wanted to provide something a little special for my new podcast followers. There you have it. If you have any questions at all, head over into the Familypreneur community at familypreneurcommunity.com and ask away. I would be happy to help you with this strategy. We'll also be back on Wednesday with a really fun midweek mastermind. This week, I am interviewing Michael Campion. He is the 16-year-old actor from Fuller House. He plays DJ Tanner's oldest son. And we'll be back on Friday, of course, ending the week with some Familypreneur reflections. Until next time, have a good one. We'll talk soon. Bye.
Don't miss my mom's next episode. Subscribe to the Familypreneur podcast and automatically get access to the newest episodes every week.